time to test it out before I got on. Okay,
S-
woo,
So
that's a relief.
welcome to the summit, Gena. So yeah, as I said, I've invited you to basically share your experience with volunteers. You title your talk "Growing and Giving Back: The Power of Pro Bono Database." Uh,
Yes.
but yeah, it just inspire us. I think that's probably the
All right.
the brief. Thanks
All
again.
right. Well, I hope I do inspire you. I'm going to share my screen now. We're going to share on this. And I just want to say that I'm super honored to be here and to have been asked to give this presentation. It's been a great about a year, closing in on a year that I have worked with the noise solution with Viz for Social Good Noise Solution being one of the NGOs that I'm working with. And it's been a great opportunity to get to know the database community better and experience you know the time and expertise that people donate in order to raise awareness for so many different issues. And I've been lucky enough to work on issues such as deaf people in Nigeria and how well um, legislation for torture prevention has gone throughout the world. And then also, of course, on the data visualization project for Noise Solution, which thank you so much to Damien for the lead in, especially on the use of AI, because that's going to factor in rather significantly to my presentation. So let's get started. Okay. So hi, I'm Gena, everybody. I'm coming at you from my home in Shanghai, China, where I've lived for 22 years. And in my career, I have done a number of different things. I currently hold a Master of Professional Services in Data Analytics and Visualization from the Maryland Institute College of Art, or MICA. And in my previous life and kind of current life, I was a portrait photographer for many years in Shanghai and in the Boston area, which is where I'm from. I've also worked as a technical instructor and course developer for the IT industry. And I've even tried my hand at math teaching in high schools, which was lots of fun. But currently, creative drive and an itchiness led me to make a career change. I was interested in a new creative challenge, a technical challenge. I fell in love with data viz, and I started my MPS at MICA, which has been a great opportunity to learn about narrative structure, audience, accessibility, and also design training, a formal design training. So I'm a self-taught photographer, and I wanted a more formal design skill training, and data storytelling being, in vogue as it is. Getting a real lesson, a real education in how to build narrative was super important to me and super valuable from this program. Also, networking with like-minded professionals in the field and getting to know the data viz community, which is really such a welcoming professional community. And I say this with a lot of different community experiences. This is probably the top one, in my opinion. So a little bit more about me. I liken my drive for my professional interests to be related to my knowledge collection, and this is just some icons. I'm just going to do some data viz for you here of different areas where I get my information and gain knowledge. So you might be able to recognize some of those icons, if not most of them. Another thing I like to do a lot is do puzzles. And so again, you might recognize some of these. If you know, you know. And all of this, I feel like, puts me in a good position to build data visualization with tools such as these, which are kind of at the crossroads of information and design and puzzles. So I feel like this encapsulates sort of my drive intellectually, creatively, and technically. So being a puzzle and game enthusiast, I've always been interested in learning new tools and tinkering in general. In particular, I like working with open source tools that can offer a full control over design, like R, for example. And I have a statistics background. So during my program at MICA, I became pretty familiar with R, and it's actually pretty easy to learn. I'm not a natural programmer. I am a statistician, but it's actually more of a scripting language. And you'd be surprised how little code you need to write to come up with some pretty crazy good results. So it's really good for data wrangling, and initial analysis and exploration and graphic exploration as well. So when I was building my capstone for MICA, which was a 4 academic poster size static visualization story about Shanghai's change from basically coming out of China's sort of rougher eras in the 80s to the megacity that it is today, both in terms of population growth, land use change, and infrastructure development. I used R to really develop a lot of these, to develop almost all of my graphics. I used ArcGIS for some too, as you'll see, but what I did was I used R to clean and wrangle the data and then find the data, by the way, which was plentiful. And so I sourced hundreds and hundreds of data sources. This is just a few that I used in the actual finished product in both English and Mandarin to tell the story of Shanghai's growth. And so I juxtaposed this with the growth of the largest US cities as comparison. So let's take a look at some of the graphics that I built. Okay, so for example, this graphic here is a simple bar chart, and it shows the population of Shanghai about 2 years ago, which is I think around 28 million people. It's a lot of people. And then the population of the next, I think the 8 largest American cities, okay, in order. And what I discovered that actually Shanghai bested the population of all 8 of them combined. So what I did was I took these elements, exported them to a PDF or I think an SVG file, pulled them into Illustrator, and created this graphic. And so this graphic, what I really try to do with my graphics is make it real obvious what it is that you're looking for. So in this case here, there's the population. You can see the population. You can look at individually each city and its population, but you can tell right away that Shanghai can fit all of them inside itself. And that is the goal. That's always the goal for me, if I can achieve it. And just to continue, in the second graphic here, what I wanted to do was I wanted to tell the story of Shanghai's status as a world city or a mega city. And so this required going way back to the birth of the mega city in the mid 20th century. And so I want to quiz anybody. Do we know what the first mega city of the world is? And I don't have chat available, but if somebody wants to call out some answers, who can guess what the world's first mega city is? Does anyone have a guess? Let's see if I can pull. Oh, hello from Shanghai. Nope, not Tokyo. Good guess though. It is a mega city for sure, and it is one of the largest, if not the largest. We're going back to like mid 20th century, not Dubai. First mega city, going way back. Anyone? Yes. Who said it? Who said it? Who said New York? Yuki, you are the winner. New York City is the world's first mega city. Okay, and so yeah, absolutely. It's super interesting, right? And so this is in the day, and London is up there too. London is one of the first, and so we know it. Did you know that Shanghai? Does anyone know any of the history of Shanghai? Shanghai's actually has a really long and storied history, going back to the Belle Epoque, the Golden Age. And in the early 20th century, Shanghai was actually called the Paris of the East, and it was a haven, an open port haven during World War II for many, many thousands and millions of European refugees coming from the European theater of the war. And so when communism took over, and I'm going to go to the next graphic now. So what this is here, when communism took over, it actually sent Shanghai and the country back into a lot of a decline. And then during the 80s grew back up again. So that's just essentially like an overview of what you're about to see. This is a small multiples graph of every 10 years from 1950 on of the world's largest cities and their population. So this small graph here would be 1950, and this purple line would be New York City, and then all of the smaller cities below it, up to just the top 20 of the world, 1960, 1970, so on and so forth. Let's continue on. So what I did is I took this graphic and I built this graphic out of it. And so I turned them all on their side, and I built the story into the graphic. So not only was Shanghai one of the biggest cities in the world back in 1950, But by 1960, we started to see a decline because of political issues in China, like the Cultural Revolution and the Great Leap Forward caused a lot of cities, a lot of urban areas in China to vacate and to lose population for the drive to work in the countryside. And so during the 70s and into the 80s, Shanghai's population, coupled with the fact that other cities were growing during these times, became less and less, dropped its ranking in the top 20. But by the mid 90s, Shanghai started to grow again. And then up until around 2000s, Shanghai really started to grow. And you can see the story here. It's pretty clear that it's become one of the biggest cities in the world. So in fact, it is by population and by land mass, it is in the top 3 now. Okay, so the next graph I want to show you is this Gantt chart. So I did a study on the metro system, which got built, and it took about 30 years. Started in the 60s, but then they had to put that on hold because of political issues. And then in the 80s, it started back up again. And this metro system is actually one of the largest in the world. It is the largest by track area now. And just to say, in less than 3 decades, Shanghai went from no rapid transit, subterranean rapid transit, to one with 20 lines and counting. And so I wanted to show this in a time series fashion to allow the viewer to see how much was happening at any given time. Okay, so this is a Gantt chart that, again, I built this in R, just like the last 2. And I used start and end dates for each line and their sections. Okay, so each line, for example, this is line 1, and it has 3 sections that were built during different times. And basically what I did was I took this data and I created this slide with it. And I'm going to scan in because it's just a little bit more interesting if we look at the detail. So I got rid of the sort of the pointless color that R threw into the chart, which didn't make any sense. And one of the design, a very, an important design philosophy is to really control your use of color. So making all of the line lengths the same color, but then encapsulating the actual line and its phases with the actual color of the subway line, and that is the color in real life, as well as the font that's used for the name or the number of the line. So you can see here that I encoded the information into the bar itself, even added question marks when I didn't have a start date, which I didn't have for a couple of these. And then I allowed the user to provided some insight to see, like, when were the busiest times of development. And that happened to actually be in 2005, when there were as many as 19 separate sections being built at the same time. Shanghai, coupled with some of these single data points, like we had 60 moles in the city, 60 building the subway at any given time. There's almost 1,200 trains. I think there are more now. It's a huge capital investment, almost $70 billion US. And it is one of the world's largest, it is not, if not the world's largest subway system now. I would even say that it's probably number 1 on all 3 of those counts. Another thing I did was to add a little infographic, because in each one of my posters, I provided some insight as to how this aspect of Shanghai's growth would compare that to a city like, in this case, New York City. And it's actually interesting in that Shanghai's system was built on the strengths of New York City's subway system and not its weaknesses. So that's just an interesting little tidbit right there. So continuing on, let's see if I can. There we go. Okay. Okay, so for the noise solution project, I knew I wanted to do something different. I have been working with Biz for Social Good on this. I've done 4 projects now, and this was my 3rd. And I had used sort of a Flourish, Canva coupling of tools to create some rather simple data stories. And plug and play tools are great, but they are limited, and they're often, some of their more customizable features are behind a firewall. And so this is one of the draws of learning an open source tool, and but it's not for the faint of heart. So I went into Data Camp and took a quick lesson in JavaScript, and then another one in D3. It took me a couple of weeks. And then I was lucky enough to, I'm a member of the Data Visualization Society. How many DVS folks do we have out there? Pretty great, another great community to get involved in if you're a data visor. And they run a mentor program, a mentor-mentee program. Yay. And it happened to coincide directly with the Viz for Social Good project that was using noise solution data. So I hooked up with a really awesome D3 full stack developer based in Portland, Oregon, and she really helped me sort of nail down best practices and get to GitHub and Git Bash. These are things that it would have taken me a lot longer to learn if I didn't have somebody sort of directing me through it. So I'm super grateful for that. And then, of course, I used ChatGPT. ChatGPT is just instrumental in learning, and you're going to see sort of how I approached it. But it's really, really a good tool to learn, especially for the open source tools, because the variations don't change. Whereas for my last project with the Association for Prevention of Torture Data, which I built in Power BI, ChatGPT was a little bit more limited because we were on different versions. And so I kept trying to correct it, and it kept bringing me back to the old version that it knew. So it was less of a fit there. But for D3, it was actually really, really good and really valuable. And so this helped me get a D3 app built. So let's take a look at that experience. So noise solution, you have heard about it from Damien, so I don't have to go into great detail here. Such an inspirational organization, musical creativity, empowering at-risk youth. I think one of the things I liked about this project the most was that the solution doesn't dwell on the participants' problems or difficulties. They sort of say, hey, let's just put that on the shelf for now, and let's focus on what you want to do and focus on the positive in this moment. And I just think that's such a valuable thing for somebody who's struggling in their lives. So what were the objectives? Well, I wanted to show the impact on well-being, and this was done in a quantitative way. It's a quantitative analysis using that SWEM-Web score that the student, the participant self-reported before the project and after the project. So it's about a 10-week stretch that between which they actually create a musical piece and they report their well-being before and afterward. I wanted to, instead of more of a data story for this, I really wanted to create more of an interrogation tool. So I wanted the user to be able to drill down into the data to super detailed levels, or to sort of get a 10,000-foot view to get a sense for sort of who were the people that experienced this much growth, or where did these people come from, or what race and location had the best success, for example. And more than anything, I really wanted to make it fun. So let's get into it. So this is just an example. These are just the tools that I'm just going to talk about a little bit, because I'm going to take us off of the slide presentation now and take us into the actual app. So this is the app that I built for Noise Solution. And I'm going to click into the first tool, which is, this is the first graphic that I built. It's a series of bee swarm plots and that are grouped by age group. Okay, so I actually created that age group within the data. So this is all from raw data. The data, of course, I cleaned it, wrangled it, prepared it in R, and created CSVs out of it so that I could then use it in this tool. That's my MO, and I'm sticking with it. So in this case here, what I did in this example here is I asked ChatGPT, I said, hey, let's take a look at this for a second. Let's go in here. Actually, I want to show you, before we get into the data, before we get into that, I do want to show you. Okay, so here is my first prompt for ChatGPT. Hey, I have this data frame, contains a quantitative column, and then some other things, and I want to build an interactive data visualization that will allow me to do blah, blah, blah. Well, I didn't even tell it to write it in D3. So what do you think it's going to do with this? Well, not much. So essentially, I worked through this for a couple of days before I started to realize that I needed to get my ducks in a row before I actually got into ChatGPT. I needed to make sure I knew what the names of I needed to make sure that what was I going to name my fields? What was I going to name my divs in the HTML page? Details like that. I needed to have that done before I actually approached the app with the app building with ChatGPT. So I'm going to spare you the details, the sort of details of working from this prompt, other than to say that I did the preparation, made my decisions, and then I went back to the drawing board and wrote a much more detailed prompt. Exactly how many rows I have. What tool did I want to use? Here was the names of all of my columns in the data set. I want to be able to do this, that, and the other thing. And so I got super specific. Now, obviously, it's not specific enough because I don't know what technical challenges I'm going to come across. And I'll explain to you why when we go through the app. So this was a lot more successful. And of course, honestly, you know, there are always going to be errors. And there were many, many of these types of errors that popped up, which is to be expected because, again, the tool only knows, AI only knows what you tell it. So unless you know everything from the top down of the problem that you're trying to solve, which none of us do, you'll never not run into errors. And these are to be expected. But this error in particular was something that needs to be watched out for. As I gained more knowledge of the structure and syntax of these JavaScript files, what I realized is that it was writing some things incorrectly. It was actually giving me code that had functions being called before they're defined. This is more of a systematic fundamental mistake. And this is where ChatGPT, this is where things can go wrong. It can also bring you circular back to the original question, the answer that it gave you for a question that it wasn't correct. So you really need to be on top of it. And this is where my own learning took precedence over what ChatGPT was telling me. But eventually I got there. It was super exciting. And I had a wonderful app to show for it. Okay, so now I'm actually going to show you the app. So this is super exciting. And I will show you briefly. Okay, so what we have here is an average. This is two tools, okay? And the first is an average score calculator, okay? So essentially these, and the second tool is the B-swarm plots that are grouped by age group. So each one of these dots represents a participant in the data set, okay? And that can be viewed here. So that information, if you care to see it, can be viewed right here. But what I really want the user to be able to do is I want them to be able to select any or all of these different demographic groups and find out what the average score is. So right now, the average score overall, the average score change is a positive one by 2.38 points. Now, that doesn't mean anything other than to most of us here, other than that it's positive. Okay, so it is a positive change. People generally feel better after going through this program, which is awesome. But what about if I want to find out about girls? Let's see. Let's see, women. Okay. So what this app now does is it filters through and it highlights all of the girls in the data set. And it recalculates the average score change to reflect that of just girls. Well, what if I want to see girls from Cambridge? Let's take a look. Well, here we go. It cuts it down even further. And now we're looking at just the girls from Cambridge, even higher. Now let's talk about girls from Cambridge who happen to be white. And again, it's changing the average score. So this is really neat because then you can actually go ahead, and there aren't that many people in this. This is getting smaller and smaller. You can actually go ahead and, well, what about men? Let's see. What's the change there? You can actually get a sense for sort of what that average score is and compare that. So for example, if I'm looking at white boys from Cambridge who are between the ages of 10 and 12 compared to that of girls, that's going to actually give me that information that I need, which is super cool. Okay, so does anyone have any questions? I just want to see. Let's see. Nope. Okay, well, I will hold on for later. So the next graphic that I'm going to show you is this demographic breakdown. So this was fun. And so another thing that I wanted to just point out was I used the branding colors of Noise Solution for this app, and that's not always advisable to do for data viz, but in this case, it really worked out because I found that chartreuse color to be very positive, uplifting, Purple's kind of moody. Maybe you can construe it as negative. And in this graphic here, I had to represent the no change, people whose scores didn't change from start to finish. And I just symbolized that in blue with a very, very small circle. And circle is a very friendly, fun shape. Okay, so again, in this case here, I use circles like I did in the last graphic. And what I wanted to do here was the circles signify each of these represents a participant. The size of the circle denotes the size of the score change, whether it's positive or negative. And the color denotes the direction in which the score changed. So the user can then sort these points on 2 axes, depending on their choice. And so I offered the user a selection of 6 different demographics: age group, gender, ethnicity, location, participant industry or referral sector, and then whether or not that participant had external interaction with their social media noise solution site. So taking a look at age group and gender, you can see that boys age 13 to 15 constitute a large section of the participant pool. But if I were to then take a look at females age 20 to 24, you can see that their experiences are all positive in this example. It's a small sample, but I do think it's somewhat significant. So let's take a look here. I'm going to take a look at location, and I will look at participant industry. Okay, so you can see here a lot of people are from Ipswich, and they're coming from all different, being referred by all different sectors, most commonly through education and mental health. And again, I can tooltip on top and get a better look at specific information and details about individual participants. Okay, so my next tool is a map. I'm a map lover, I can't help it. And this is called beta for a reason, which is that it loads very slow. And this is one of the limitations that I came across that I have yet to be able to solve. But essentially, it's learning about GeoJSON. It's a very large file that dictates the rendering of this map, and it takes about 5 or 10 seconds to load, but it does load. And what I really wanted to do was provide the user with a way to get a regional look at where the success of this program is. And so we do know that it's an East England program, and that most of over and large, the response has been pretty positive. The impact is positive. And so what this map does is it allows me to hover over a region, say Ipswich, because it is the largest, and I can click on that, and it's going to bring me to another set of graphics to the left here, a set of data points, single data points that give us the region name, the number of participants in that region, and then their average score change, with a distribution spread of the age group, and then 3 pie charts that actually show, sort of at a top-down level, what are the largest groups here? Well, in this case, white boys and men that are referred to noise solution from a mental health sector. And I can look at, in this case here, Bournemouth. I think there's only 1 participant, so this is going to be pretty small, but it is giving us the information that we need, which is that the score change went down. It was 1 person, 1 female who was white, in the age 13, 15 age bracket, who was referred by a government employee. So that's essentially this app. And I'm going to go back to my slide presentation to talk a little bit about further work. So one of the other benefits, besides the upskilling potential and the ability to sort of work soup to nuts on a data viz application, whereas in a job you might be focused on one aspect of it, that's invaluable. And so I really try to embrace that every single time I do an app for Viz for Social Good. So continuing my work with the organization has been one of the nice surprises of this. I've really loved working with the organizations like Global Deaf Health Initiative. Doing a knowledge transfer for them has been really rewarding. And I'm doing the same thing with Noise Solution. We're using statistics. They want statistically significant proof on a dashboard that they're going to build in Tableau from this data. So I'm going to use R to do that statistical analysis and build CSVs, which will then be ported to Tableau, which is a new tool for me. Oh my gosh. And It's actually really simple. So the R statistical analysis, this is going to be the code. This is it. I'm literally going to, I use ChatGPT to determine that the test that I needed to do was this Wilcoxon signed rank test, which I won't bore you with, but it's really, it's essentially one line of code that allows me to get that for all the different, for age. So does age, so if I group by age group, so for example, between the ages of 4 and 12, is there a significant difference between start score and end score? Yes or no? And in almost all cases, the answer was yes. So that's been super gratifying. I then went and pulled that data out, wrangled it, cleaned it, put it into a CSV, and got this beautiful data that I can then port and send out to the Tableau dashboard, which we can then visualize in a number of different ways. So it's been super, super valuable across the board. I've really enjoyed working with not only the organizations and the folks at Viz for Social Good, but also in the Slack channel, networking with people on LinkedIn and learning from people and getting different insight has been, it's just such a great way to build your network, to build your skills, and also to just get interested in what's going on. And that's really been the biggest surprise for me, is that I'm really becoming more and more invested in these causes and actually trying to think of more to bring to the table for the organization. So with that, I thank you, and connect with me on LinkedIn. I would love to hear from you and perhaps collaborate on a tool at some point. Thank you so much.
Wow, thanks, Gena. For people that haven't done any projects, we got a Slack channel as well, so connect with Gena and us as a community. As you can see from Gena, she can do amazing stuff, create amazing data viz. It's really amazing what you do. So thanks a lot, Gena. Amazing.
Thank you.
It's always good that you always keen to learn new projects as well, or new tools.
It's an opportunity, and we shouldn't waste it, right? That's how I see it. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Gena. You know what I really love is your curiosity, right? It's just, whether it's games or experimenting with technology or techniques, it's amazing, right? And that's what keeps us going. There's always something new to learn. If you think about, maybe, was it 13 years ago, Tableau showed up on the scene, and like, what is this visualization? And people were curious, and now look where it is. So I just encourage everybody to just keep learning and be curious, and you're a role model for that. So I look forward to working with you on, future projects in 2025. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Any questions before I think we're due to have a bit of a break.